All right. So I know already a lot of you, but I guess there's still a lot of you that don't really know me. So what we're gonna start with, obviously, besides thanking you really for being here, is just going over the agenda of the day, which is gonna be very simple. It's not gonna be a very much like in-depth presentation. It's more of an overview of Notion for content creators. Simply because I am not really a content creator myself, but my clients are. So I didn't want to go like too deep into it, mostly because I want to show what's possible and why I think that Notion is a great tool for that. So we're going to start with a little introduction of me for those who don't know me yet. Then we're going to start with talking about Notion and why we need a central system and why Notion is perfect for that. Then we're going to go over the phase of like taking action, then collaboration, integrations, and then at the end we're going to have a Q&A. So please don't hesitate to leave all your questions in the chat. I will check them out at the end, all right? So let's get started. Where do I start? Very easily. My name is Camille. I'm French. I started using Notion in May last year of 2020, and I honestly fell in love with the tool. I know it sounds exaggerated, but it's true. There's no better way to put it, honestly. It felt very fluid for me, and the more I used it, the more I realized that you could use it for so many use cases. And for someone like me that loves to try, experiment, and just do a lot of different things, I thought it was wonderful to finally have one tool that is so flexible. So that's the love story of Notion. Otherwise, because of that love story, I became quite involved in the community, mostly on Twitter, also Facebook, Discord, and all of that. Later on in October last year, I became a Notion ambassador, which was a great moment, obviously, because then I was even more involved in the community, which I loved. In the meantime, we also restructured the French-speaking community, and we created the Portuguese one. And I'm the co-creator, co-manager, let's say, of those communities. And it's absolutely fantastic to be surrounded by so many creative and, I don't know, passionate people. I feel like the Notion community is truly one of the most inspiring one. So that's about my background. Oh, and since March of this year, I actually decided to quit my previous job and just go full on Notion consulting. So that's a bit about me. And jumping onto that, my current clients are content creators. I did not specifically look for them, like for this type of clients. They just happened to be. And it was great because it really challenged me to think about the specific challenge or use case rather. So they have obviously many different social medias accounts to manage. Most of us do, right? But they also have YouTube channels, which are extremely time consuming, and it needs to be consistent. So that's even more specific. They also have newsletters and other projects like writing books, podcasts, and this kind of things. So as you can imagine, they really need to be on top of the schedule, and they really need to know what's going on and like what are the deadlines for everything, because it's all going on at once. So yeah, they realized that not only they needed to have it all clearly in mind for themselves, but they also needed help at some point, because obviously we're only human and you can do so much in 24 hours, and we all love productivity and all of that, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes you need to be able to collaborate with people, and most importantly, to delegate some of the tasks. Otherwise, you just burn yourself out. So that's not the point nor the goal. So they need a tool that is not only like centralized, let's say, but also that really can help collaboration, or rather like has collaboration at the center of the creation of the tool itself, So they already knew that they needed something like this. And they realized that they needed something central, not only as a tool, but like as a proper system. So they needed to create a central system from creation to creation. Because obviously, if you need to create content, you need to have ideas, right? That makes sense. But in order to get ideas, we need to see ideas of other people, right? And to consume content yourself. So they needed a place where they could have it all, basically. And I really like this quote, that if you're waiting to have a good idea before you have any ideas, you won't have many. That's pretty much true. You need to have a safe place to not only write down whatever is on your mind and just random notes, random ideas, because you never know when it's going to be the next really important and really, let's say, valuable one. So that was definitely one of the main points. However, it's a challenge because we're always submerging information nowadays, and it's really hard to keep track of everything, right? I know before Notion, I was always using notebooks, and not only one, that would have been too easy. I would use like a ton of them, post-its, all of that. And obviously, then you're not actually taking track of anything, and it just becomes even more messy. So even when you want to capture your ideas and your thoughts, it's way easier if you do it in one single place. Otherwise, it's a mess, basically. So this is an example of a Notion dashboard that you could use for curation. I'm going to try to pronounce it better. Divided in 4 sections. So as you can see, there's like the inbox on the top left corner, which is where you just, the first database, basically, where everything goes that you think is going to be interesting and that you want to go back to later. It can be a podcast episode, it can be an article, it can be whatever, a type of content that you want to go back to later on. And then there is 3 more databases, resources, notes, and tags. We'll go back to this in a few minutes. Then, once you actually have a place where you can gather ideas and content, that's great. That's already a very good first step. But then you need to do something about it, right? You need to analyze the content itself and take action upon it. So I have stored information. Now what? Ideally, you would take some time of your week, your month, and really dedicate that time to consume the content, first of all, whatever it is, if it's an episode, if it's an article. Take notes upon this, and then decide, do I want to keep this piece of content? Do I want to archive it because maybe it was not that great? And if I do keep it, how can I categorize it? Is it a note that I wrote myself? Is it an external resource? And what tags can I apply to it so that in the future I can actually go back to the tag, which, it's a very simple concept. You just tag it by precisely a concept or word, something that you can go back to easily and then just see all the content linked to it. I'm going to show you again. So how it will look like actually. Let's imagine that you have saved articles and podcasts and videos and maybe some random notes that you also took. What you would do is basically just drag and drop the content. So if it was a note that you took, you would just drag it to the note right here database. If it was an episode, if it was like an article, you would drag and drop it to the resource database. And then later on, you could directly into in the body of the page, apply a few tags. I'm sure many of you already are familiar with this. And next step, you can actually reuse the content that you just consumed and categorized. So that's great. It's way easier to do it if you already have those 2 steps properly done, because we might have in mind, specific ideas about the topic. You know that you can read about this topic if you read books from this or this person. But if you have everything neatly organized and actually pre-consumed, if I can say so, it's going to be much easier. So for example, this is the body of a tag database page. which is, maybe I didn't take the best example, but basically you would see in the body of the page whatever type of content that is linked to it. You could potentially even pre-tag the inbox content, if you wanted to, so that you could do, for example, that on the weekend, you're going to spend 1 hour just dedicated to, let's say, consuming content about marketing, and then another hour about gardening. Let's imagine. Well, if it was already in the inbox, and even before like actually consuming the content, but you knew what the topic was about, you could pre-tag it, and then it would be easier that way. But yeah, very simple concept here. And the next step is to make it flow seamlessly. What I mean by that is to actually moving from the curation phase to the creation phase. And for that, it's extremely important to have a clear view of the process. And a clear view, to me at least, and to my clients also, mean an actual visual representation of the process, because we are constantly reading up, being surrounded by words, and it's great, but sometimes you actually do need an image to properly understand the steps by steps. Not everybody is like this, but for the people that know that you are a bit more visual, I really recommend this. So what you can do is create, I'm not sure it's called exactly, I think it's a board, or maybe a flow chart, sorry. And you can create it on a tool like Whimsical. There's also Miro. I think you can do it in Figma, any tool you want, but just try to actually create some sort of visual representation of the process, not only for yourself, but mostly in case you actually collaborate with people. Let's imagine that you have a VA, or that you have someone, a copywriter, and you work with that person in Notion, but they want to know exactly, not only they want to know, but they also need to know, when is it that they start to take over, and then what to do with that content. So one thing that I love about Notion is that you can actually integrate those kind of files directly into a Notion page. This is a Notion page with a flow. So that's great. And we always refer back to it, because that way, if you forget, or if it's a new hire or anything, they already know, what to do. Anyway, next up, if you're going to collaborate with people, another great thing to do, and I know Natasha is here in the chat, is to create SOPs, because it's truly a game-changing practice to create standard operating like procedures. That's SOP. Basically, you just write down the steps to a specific task. And this is extremely important when you're creating content with other people, so that it stays coherent and consistent. Because I might have a way of creating, let's say, an Instagram post or a story, but maybe, the actual other person you're working with is not working the same way. So if you collaborate, it's way better to do those kind of things to make sure that you're on the same page. And one good way to do that is to use database templates. So as we can see here on the right, sorry, I'm talking very fast, I'm really sorry. But basically, if you start using database templates to create SOPs, or just pre-filled content types, so for example, like a video, a tweet, a post, whatever it is, you and the other person know exactly what to do and how to do it. And that's a great way to make sure that it's consistent and coherent. Yeah, best practices also, like just general best practices, depending on the type of content that you're creating, because obviously each platform has, not only related to the algorithm, but also just aesthetics and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that everything is written down. It's a suggestion. Obviously, you don't have to do it, but it's easier when it's done like this. A few tips in general for let's say, teams, little teams that use Notion for content creation. I would say try to limit the number of databases, the total number of them. Why? Because we have two extremely useful and practical way to use Notion, feature, which is the link database feature. For me, it's honestly one of the best things in Notion. And the fact that you can change the view also of the same database. And then adding on to that, you also have the filters and the sorting options. So really, if you try to think about the type of data that's going to enter in the database, and really think not only what is this data and how am I going to use it, basically, you're going to find out that many times we tend to duplicate databases to have like two separate, let's say, type of content that could easily be just in one and then filtered out by a property or just shown differently on another type of view. So take your time and think about the structure itself before you actually start creating a space. And yeah, that's pretty much it here. A few examples. These are concrete examples with my clients. So on the left, this one is a dashboard. It looks a bit messy like this, but we have a lot going on right now. This is a dashboard of repurposing content. So basically what we do is we base this type of content on videos that are already out. And then depending on channels, we decide, okay, it has to be tagged like this, tag this. And what is great is this is actually a separate database. It's not the same as the main one, which is mostly for YouTube videos. But they are linked together through a relation. And it's just very easy because not only we have this view, unfortunately, I couldn't show everything, as you can imagine, for privacy purposes, but you can show it depending on the type of channel that is linked to it, if it's on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or anything else. On statuses also, depending on if it's an idea, a draft, ongoing, let's say, or published or scheduled, the other way around. And we have something very similar to the, like on the right. Also, this time around with the same database, on top by the channel, later on as a calendar. So we actually see the deadlines, the deadlines for content creation itself, let's say, and then another one for the publication. Obviously, you don't have to have everything on the same page either, but this is how we do it. Then we have a concrete example also of the content itself, how it's being created. On the left, you have the research page, which is this is a page within the production database where the content is actually created. So we have the whole research phase, and then within that research, we have another page, which is usually the draft of the article that is being done by a writer. And it's great because if everything is on Notion, not only do everybody have the view on it, depending on the permissions, obviously, but you can have a global view of what's going on and what is being done by who. But you can also, give your opinion, because maybe somebody has an idea and maybe somebody's starting to creating, let's say, an article, but they might not have all the knowledge or all the, let's say, I don't know, information required to write that thing. And a person that might be even out of the, let's say, regular process, if they came across it and they noticed something wrong, technically speaking, or something like that, they could actually comment, and maybe it will save the content, let's say. So yeah, now we're gonna move on to collaboration and delegation of tasks. And for me, Notion is honestly one of the best tools for that, because it's really meant to be a collaborative tool, right? So obviously you have the very simple features like sharing, permissions, which are sort of the same, but not exactly, because what I mean sharing is also sharing like on the web, which for me is absolutely great. It's such a great, simple feature. And you have different permission levels. You have different ways of commenting also. It could be on a page, it could be on a specific block, on a specific word even, if you really want to be picky. And you can mention people, you can add some reminders. I mean, those are obviously the basics, but it works pretty well. So, I mean, if you need to have everybody on board, it could be like the writer, it can be the person who just does the research, the actual person filming the videos, the editor. If everybody, can collaborate directly in the content, let's say, on the content, it's very, very much easier than if you were to juggle between different apps. And talking about that, well, now we also have the different integrations. So obviously, natively, there were already a few very basic ones like Google Drive, Evernote, Trello, and Asana, which were not so much, they were already useful, but in this specific case, except maybe Google Drive, it wouldn't be necessarily what we would need, let's say, as content creators. The Slack notification can be quite useful in case you don't want to spend all your time in Notion, but you want to be notified when, let's say, a draft is being done, or something like this. But what is even more exciting is the API, that launched last month. Obviously, it's still not completely done, but it's already quite solid, I would say, and very exciting. So at the moment, you can either do an integration yourself with some code, or you can use tools like Integromat, Zapier, Automate, and if I pronounce it like Christina said earlier, IFT. I thought it was IFTTT, but let's continue, which are basically just automation tools. What does it mean exactly? Why is it such a good, good news? Because now we can possibly, you can actually do it, but I think it's only going to get better in the future as it gets more stable and there's more property types and just content type and overall actions that you can do through the API. You might be able to just replace the store of apps that are like Buffer or Hootsuite, sorry. Those kind of scheduling apps that you would typically use if you were to make your own content calendar, and then you would have to link it to your social medias and all that. You might be able to do it directly in Notion. So that's even better, right? If you can do it all in just one app, it saves you a lot of trouble. And right now, I have done a few tests, let's say. In the past, I did link Twitter to Notion, and it was very simple. Obviously, it was literally just this tweet that you can see on the right, but it was very exciting to see that it worked, that through just a little piece of text within a database page, it actually became a tweet. That was great. And this was through Automate. And this was also through Automate. I did the same with LinkedIn. So same process, just a post, like some sort of a mini post within a page, within a database that later on automatically posted on LinkedIn. So for me, this is really where it starts to get interesting, because you can really think of Notion as a central tool in the sense that you can collect ideas, collect content that you're going to consume, then take action upon it, categorize it. You have your own library. It's great. You can go back to it, find what you need. Then you can start actually drafting the content, working on it. And possibly, I think it's going to keep getting better and better. Just posting directly to the platforms you want. So yeah, this is, for me at least, very exciting.